Climate change is a prominent issue that affects every global citizen, whether small or big, in environments. This issue requires human intervention for the future to prevent any permanent damage done to the Earth that will affect millions to billions. We are warned about climate change from environmentalists, politicians, and activists, but is it enough being told about this issue? Do other forms of media also contribute to helping bring awareness to this issue, and to what extent? First, what is climate change? Climate change is a phenomenon that commonly used when there are many greenhouse gases building up in our atmosphere, making the planet warmer. It is also a term used to refer to a change in state of climate that persists for an extended period of time. Quite often, climate change is usually presented to the public as melting ice flows, scientific charts, and global temperatures, and so on, as J.R.S. Shepard states. Its effects can do more than just warm the planet, as it can cause an imbalance in the environment such as rising sea levels, floods, desertification, etc. That is why the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is an important organization along with others to prevent travesties, as these organizations help find solutions and fund to combat climate change. Now the question is, to what extent do creative works contribute to climate change? Well, climate change in general, creative works in general invoke an emotional response, whether it's music, art, or written works. On the same notion, a community of people tend to have an emotional connection to where they live and often seek to protect and nurture it, as said from Shepard. So when we are influenced by creative works, we tend to change how we perceive our environment and surrounding ones. As Shepard states, how we perceive climate change is influenced by many sources of information, including other people's opinions, media coverage, advertising, or surroundings, landscapes, and community activities. Therefore, creative works would have the same effect as information from individuals, but now it's transcending from verbal, imaginative mediums to a full-on visual representation. However, there is some consideration that all information is distributed equally depending on economic status or country you live in, as any individual or status of power will have their own bias. So, what examples of creative works helping the cause of climate change? Well, for example, an article by Zoe Lasquez published in New York Times depicts climate change effects from 12 different artists. One artist in particular, Yves Mosher, Liquid City, shows what waterways in New York will look like at the end of the century if they rise by 6 feet. And she hopes she can ignite radical ideas for waterways. In earlier pieces, she also did a line made by flooding where Mosher walked 70 miles of New York coastline and drew blue chalk drawings 10 feet above sea level from the anticipated height waterline due to climate change. Mosher would also mark the high water boundary with illuminated beacons if she were unable to use the chalk. Mosher uses visual representation shows her views and projections and explain her position and what the future for New York would be like if climate change was not taken more seriously. This is a form where people are presented with what might be happening to their own environment, provoking that emotional response if they harbor such one for where they live. Although creative works such as Mosher can contribute to the cause, there is a negative to having this form of representation. There are limitations in which we can provide information about climate change, as most common imagery are through politicians, celebrities, and protesters, as they can provide an ineffective and polarizing information. These type of figures could create misinformation and undermine climate change along with the discredit of creative works or make it a distant issue. For example, the polar bear in an iconic photo shows the realities of climate change can prove ineffective due to the issue seen as a distant problem. And that's a core issue about climate change, as people don't realize how seriously it is. They don't, if they can just go outside and see that nothing's wrong. However, showing them that this issue is in fact real and the ramifications of climate change can make them think twice about this issue. In conclusion, to what extent does climate change does